K&M Publishing presents The Investigation of Camp Tree Trail by M. E. Hansen. This unabridged presentation is performed for you by Kirby Heyborne. To my dad, who always loved camping and taught me to love it too. Thanks for feeding me marshmallows for motivation to keep hiking the 6-mile hike when I was 6 years old. M. E. Hansen. Written transcript of verbal responses to the investigation of the fatal attacks, June 14, 2000 - Location of attacks, Camp Tree Trail, Cold Springs, Pennsylvania. Location of interview, Cold Springs, Pennsylvania. Anderson residence. Date of interview, September 9th, 2000 1. Timothy Anderson, but you can call me Tim. 2. I'm 13 years old, and I'll be 14 in 3 days. 3. Camp Tree Trail is a camp just outside Cold Springs. My parents always send my brother and I there to be one with nature, but I know they just want peace and quiet in the house for a few months. 4. 5 years, my brother 7 years. Once you turn 8, you can apply for entry. My brother didn't go this year because he got a job working at the Whittles Curios and Curiosity Store, or some strange name like that. 5. All sorts of things. 6. River rafting, orienteering, stargazing. They have their own little program that teaches you how to survive in the wild. They call it an emergency awareness program. One year, we pretended we survived a plane crash in the wilderness. They taught us how to collect rainwater from leaves. It was pretty cool. 7. Yep. 8. Surviving the zombie apocalypse. We got to throw axes and set traps and snares. My favorite was creating a wall of sticks to guard our base. The camp counselors pretended to be zombies and shuffled around slowly while throwing sticks into our traps. Once the trap went off, the zombie would fall to the ground. If the trap didn't go off, then the zombie continued to the next trap. I got second place for best snare in border protection. 9. A couple. There was this kid named Cale Johnson. He was the tallest 14-year-old I'd ever seen. And then there was Bentley, his younger brother. Bentley placed first in the zombie trap competition because he's skilled with making intricate contraptions. He wanted to be an engineer when he grew up, so it made sense. 10. Well, I wouldn't say we were best friends. I was assigned to be his camping buddy. Most of the time, Cale was really annoying. He laughed like a hyena and never knew when to stop teasing people. He got into fights, which usually got him sent to the timeout cabin. It's the last cabin bordering the woods. 11. No, but because buddies have to stick together, so I often went to timeout as well. After going 5 days in a row and missing out on canoe racing, I threatened to beat Cale up myself if he didn't start acting nicer. 12. It was, but we didn't stay there for too long. Mostly a couple hours. But it just happened that those missed hours were filled with activities I was looking forward to participating in. 13. Not really. We still went to timeout, but not as frequently. 14. There were girls there too. They camped on the other side of the pond. We had activities with them twice a week. Most of the girls were dumb, calling us names or teasing us. But we didn't mind since all of them were pretty, even the ones with glasses. 15. Only one, Ruth Jefferson. She was really, really pretty. She had blue and purple streaks in her red hair and wore a bracelet around her ankle. But I didn't have a crush on her or anything. She was more like one of the boys and hung out with us rather than with the girls whenever we had activities together. One time, she snuck out and canoed to the middle of the pond and just stared at the stars. I could see her from my cabin window. She looked beautiful floating there, smiling with her arms folded. 16. She had one best friend, Bridget Quist. I think Bentley had a crush on her because he kept trying to show her all his stuff whenever he could. She was some valley girl who wore skinny jeans or yoga pants everywhere she went. She was always chewing gum or holding something to her mouth, a straw, a toothpick, pen. I thought she was so weird, but Bentley never allowed us to tease her. He threatened to fight us if we did. I guess I would have done the same when it came to Ruth. 17. Mr. Bruce Cruz. Everyone called him Mr. Bruce. He was a scrawny guy with glasses. Kind of dorky, but in a cool way. 18. Yeah, I liked him. He'd recently got divorced, and though he tried to be professional, sometimes he'd go off on random rants about stuff we didn't need to know. 19. Well, one time, he was teaching us how to tie knots and had made a perfect square knot between a yellow and green rope. All he had to do was tighten the ropes to complete the knot, but he paused and started crying, talking about how he'd made something similar to the infinity sign, which signified eternity, and that he thought he'd spend eternity with his wife Miranda, and now she was probably in Malaysia, sitting in a hut which rested above the popsicle blue water, sipping drinks with Bert. She always liked men with names that start with B. And then he broke down and sobbed, listing all the men she'd dated. And yes, all their names started with B. 20. I felt bad for the guy. Cale and Bentley's parents divorced, and they said their mom didn't get out of bed for a week. It was rough. So Cale always tried to comfort Mr. Bruce by telling him a dirty joke or saying weird stuff in an English accent. Strangely, it worked. Mr. Bruce would always chuckle and snap out of his depressed state. It was a bad year for the guy. 21. I tried to ignore all his drama. I don't know how to comfort a sobbing man, though it was strangely refreshing to see a grown man cry over something that had nothing to do with sports. 22. Mr. Bruce did start eating more meat. He said he was starting the keto diet in order to prepare his body for the meat market again. Sometimes he would wake before the sunrise and do 100 pull-ups or push-ups and then jog for a few miles around the pond. He once offered us boys to tag along, but we wanted to sleep in. He was cool about that. 23. Nothing too out of the ordinary. I overheard and saw another counselor, Ms. Ramage, talking to him about his late-night walks in the forest. She was concerned for his safety and wanted him to stay closer to camp. Mr. Bruce said he was just blowing off steam, clearing his head, trying to keep it together. I guess he was losing a lot of money in the divorce, or maybe it was his house. I can't remember, but Ms. Ramage suggested he take a break from camp and go home for the rest of the season. One of the other counselors could manage his group. 24. He said being at Camp Tree Trail was actually the best place where he could be. At home, he'd be reminded of Miranda, and he didn't need that. He didn't want to leave and begged to stay. He promised he'd do better coping with his emotions and keep close to camp. 25. Yep. 26. He was great around us. He'd let us have second helpings at dinner and left many candy bars on our pillows. He had a fun way of quieting us down by counting to 3 and saying, "Eyes on me," and we'd respond by counting to 2 and say, "Eyes on you." If anything, he was the best thing about Camp Tree Trail. 27. Ms. Ramage was always hanging out with him. I got the feeling she really liked him, but adults are weird when it comes to showing how they feel about each other. But the other counselors didn't pay much attention to him, I guess. A couple did make fun of him behind his back, but Cale would tell them to be nice. He was like Mr. Bruce's personal bodyguard. 28. They would yell at him and tell him to mind his own business. Most of the counselors, besides Mr. Bruce and Ms. Ramage, were in their late teens or early 20s. People who just needed a summer job before heading off to college. 29. Axe throwing, knot tying, fire making, and I would have gotten a patch for stargazing. Well, Mr. Bruce called it an astronomy patch, but, well, this is the reason you're interviewing me, isn't it? You want to know what really happened that night? What I saw? 30. They say that, but it's not true, not one bit of it. 31. I'm certain of what I saw. 32. There were 12 of us, 6 boys and 6 girls. 33. Mr. Bruce and Ms. Ramage. 34. Ruth was there along with Cale and Bridget. Bentley stayed back at the infirmary due to food poisoning. He was bummed knowing Bridget would be there. He pretended to feel better, but 5 steps out of the cabin and he tossed his cookies all over the deck. Embarrassed, he ran back inside and then threw up in the big salad bowl the cook offered him. She said she had extra bowls and to keep it. 35. June 14th, to be exact. It was the night of the full moon, and Ms. Ramage wasn't sure we'd be able to see anything worth noting. 36. He insisted we still go, and that he'd found this amazing open spot further up the mountain. 37. She hesitated at first, but Mr. Bruce then got all sentimental and told her how beautiful the place was and that he looked forward to stargazing with her again. I guess it became their thing to do once the kids went to bed. Ms. Ramage mentioned how she did enjoy their last few walks together, and she supposed discovering a new place wouldn't hurt. 38. Warm, but breezy. We were all fine walking around in shorts and t-shirts during the day, all slathered in sunscreen and bug repellent, but mosquitoes for some reason were terrible at night. That night I was in jeans and a hoodie, which made me a little sweaty. Cale teased that I stunk and hoped Ruth wouldn't take a whiff and run away. He then called me a stink monster until I hit his shoulder. He got quiet as soon as Bridget and Ruth joined us. 39. It was off the beaten path, a clearing about a quarter of a mile away from camp. Mr. Bruce took his time walking the steep incline since most of us were out of breath as soon as we stepped off the actual trail. I never thought about it, but I guess that's why it's called Camp Tree Trail. All the trails were made between rows of trees. I guess the founder didn't want to upset nature and adjusted the hiking trails accordingly. 40. Some kids did. Most of us had our phones for light, but there wasn't any service for calling and stuff, so technically we all had flashlights. My phone's battery was dead, though. Cale used my charger after he lost his. But it wasn't like we needed them. The moon was bright, and there weren't any clouds. I could still make out a few constellations, and Ruth was there walking with me, so it wasn't a total waste of time. 41. I guess I liked her a little more than I liked any other girl. She made camp fun as well. She didn't mind talking about video games, and we bonded over conquering Star Command base invasion. I'd played it twice on extreme difficulty mode, and she'd played it once on medium difficulty. 42. Mr. Bruce gave us constellation books to look at. As we walked around the clearing, he wanted us to find at least 5 constellations and help one another if needed. He was all about teamwork and having each other's backs. He definitely had Ms. Ramage's back. He would act all suave and stand close to her, holding the book just right and pointing to the stars as their shoulders touched. 43. Lupus and Ursa Minor. 44. It was pretty late, around 11:40. It took us a while to gather everything together, plus we needed to do our good night ritual. 45. We'd circle a campfire, talk about the good things that happened that day. We discussed the next day's activities. We repeated the camp tree trail motto: a camper is safe and not alone when paired with a friend who is far from home. By the time everything was done, it was already 11:15. I remember because Ruth took a picture of us, and that was the time on her phone. Any girl who was getting their astronomy patch attended our closing ceremony that night. 46. About 20 minutes, maybe a little longer. 47. It was really beautiful. There were trees on either side of the opening, and it went right up the mountain. Everything was bathed in blue light. There were boulders scattered around the place, as if giants had played a game of marbles. They were perfect for sitting on. You could fit 3 kids on most of the boulders. Ms. Ramage kept telling us to be careful. 48. Screams. Really loud and scary screams. It sounded like someone being tortured or eaten by something. It scared us. Everyone got quiet and stared at the forest as the screams grew louder and louder until they were replaced with 49. Silence. 50. Deep roaring. 51. For a few minutes, then everything went really quiet. 52. The girls were first to start panicking, but Ms. Ramage calmed them down. Ruth stood next to me and grabbed my hand. I'd never held a girl's hand before. It was cold. 53. He suspected it was a bobcat or a bear that might have attacked somebody. He told us to stay quiet and gather together. Everyone obeyed, Cale especially. He stood right behind Mr. Bruce. It was the quietest I'd ever seen the kid. 54. No, wolves haven't been seen in Pennsylvania for years, like for centuries. I'm sure there were big dogs, but never wolves. But this thing wasn't a bear like everyone's been saying, or a bobcat. 55. It moved in the forest like a looming shadow in the distance. It barked like a dog, but it sounded more like a lion. I don't know how to explain it. 56. Ruth decided it was a bobcat and that it hadn't attacked a person, but instead a rabbit. It was like she tried to convince herself it wasn't as terrible as it all sounded. She said she'd seen a bobcat when she went camping last summer. She was pretty scared. 57. A little. 58. Mr. Bruce slowly motioned for everyone to return to the path. He said to take our time and stay together. We didn't want to make sudden moves and attract the animal to us. 59. She did her best to stay as calm as Mr. Bruce, but I'm pretty sure she was going to cry any minute. I felt bad that their little date was interrupted by an animal attack. 60. I kept my eyes on the forest. I don't know why, but I bounced on my heels as if I were ready to run away in a heartbeat's time. 61. We were close to the path when we heard the growls. That's when I saw its eyes. Usually animal eyes shimmer when light is shown on them. You know, like how old photos taken with a flash make people's eyes shimmer, either gold or red. This creature's eyes glowed orange, and nobody had used their flashlights yet. 62. Some of the girls were spooked because everyone could see it. The glowing eyes caught everyone's attention, and we all became nervous. 63. More like a man standing upright. 64. Mr. Bruce decided it was a bear, and for how lean it appeared in the dim moonlight, he suspected he could scare it away by being loud and big. That was a big mistake. 65. Because it charged from the forest, and what I saw wasn't a bear. 66. It charged on all fours. It was fast, like a cheetah. Mr. Bruce didn't have time to run away, and it leapt upon him immediately. It bit down on his neck and tore at the flesh, like how a dog turns its head side to side when playing with the toy you're trying to take away. 67. It towered over him. I think Mr. Bruce was about 5 feet tall, but this thing was much bigger. I'm guessing 6 feet, maybe 6.5. 68. I wasn't quite sure. I think it started eating his stomach. I don't know. After it attacked Mr. Bruce, all the kids started running, bright lights turning on and flashing like a disco ball. A lot of kids screamed, tossed their constellations books to the ground, and some weren't quite sure where to run. Ms. Ramage had already started running too, trying to guide any nearby kids safely down the mountain and back to camp. Cale, Bridget, and Ruth were still with me. We just stood there, in shock. Freezing is a natural response as well when faced with danger. And boy, were we in danger. 69. Cale kept calling out to Mr. Bruce. He turned on his flashlight, though Bridget insisted he stop. That's when I had a better look at it. Think of a German shepherd's head pasted onto a man's body and cover it in thick brown gorilla hair. Blood dripped from its snout when it looked at us and charged. 70. I ran with Ruth toward the nearest boulder. I only heard Cale scream out an F word before he went quiet. 71. Bridget ran the opposite direction. 72. Ruth and I crouched close to the ground behind the boulder. We figured we'd be safe there. Ruth was so scared, like her muscles were really stiff and she started to breathe weird. I guess she was hyperventilating. 73. Bridget hid behind a different boulder. She hyperventilated also. Come to think about it, I guess I did too. 74. I think it could smell her. The girl smelled like the beauty section in a mall. Whether it was the fragrant product in her hair, the flavored lip gloss, or her body spray, the monster found her almost immediately. 75. It attacked her, biting directly onto her head, its strong jaw snapping shut over her perfectly placed braids. I remember Ruth screaming as I pulled her away, forcing my own legs to move. 76. We ran. We ran as fast as we could back to camp. Ruth eventually let go of my hand and ran ahead of me. I was being polite, trying not to drag her down the mountain, but I guess I held her back. She did win all the camp races, so I wasn't surprised when she reached the base of the mountain first. 77. We got turned around and found ourselves at the timeout cabin. 78. I insisted we continue toward the main lodge, but she already entered the cabin and pulled me inside. The door didn't have a lock on it, so we worked together and pushed the bunk bed in front of it. I knew it wouldn't have won me a prize against warding off zombies, but I'd hoped it would have kept the beast outside. 79. We slid under the lower bunk and tried to stay as still and as quiet as possible. I hummed my favorite song in my head, and Ruth held a pillow to her mouth in order to stifle her cries. 80. She started to cry into the pillow and said she didn't want to die. I wanted to cry too. I was only 13 and hadn't done much with my life. I had barely held a girl's hand. and I didn't think conquering all 50 levels of Star Command base invasion counted as a big accomplishment. 81. Moonlight streamed in through a single window, creating sharp shapes on the wooden floor. Besides the bunk bed, there was a desk, a couple chairs, a bookshelf, bathroom with a flushing toilet, and a linens closet. I also remember a 21 Pilots poster on the wall. 82. We figured we were safe. We lay in silence, beside each other, underneath the bed. Ruth still hugged the pillow, and I tried to calm my racing heart, though I wasn't sure if it was racing because of everything that had happened, or if it was because I was lying next to Ruth Jefferson. I hoped she couldn't smell my sweaty armpits. 83. Probably a few minutes, I don't know. Time slowed down. 84. I was willing to stay there all night. I hoped whatever that thing was would have returned to the forest and that Ms. Ramage would find us in the morning, confirming we were safe. Unfortunately, my hopes were dashed to pieces. 85. A knock at the door. Well, a bang at the door. 86. A boy named Dylan Smith was begging to be let inside. He'd seen us run in the direction of the cabins and had followed, hoping to join us, so he wouldn't be alone. He tried to push open the door, making the bunk bed shake. I had to get out from underneath it to tell him to head toward the lodge, but he was too scared to leave. 87. He said he thought the monster heard him running and would show up any minute. Ruth started hyperventilating again, and I wasn't sure what to do. Ruth shouted from beneath the bed for him to go away. 88. Not too well. Dylan demanded he be let inside since Ruth was in there too. 89. Sick to my stomach. I was so close to tossing my own cookies or passing out. 90. He suddenly stopped banging on the door and ran behind the cabin. I saw a shadow go across the window and thought it was him. 91. Through the bathroom window, I heard the glass break and Dylan call my name. 92. I could hear him stepping onto the toilet, but then he started yelling, and the monster started eating him. 93. You know the sound people make when biting into a carrot? 94. I hid underneath the bed. I guess I could have moved it and escaped, but Ruth was still lying there too afraid to do anything, and I didn't want to leave her behind. 95. It was in the cabin with us. The floorboards creaked underneath its weight, and it sniffed the air like a dog sniffing for a fox. 96. We both buried our faces into the pillow to keep ourselves from crying out. 97. It threw the bunk bed across the room and grabbed at me. Ruth bolted out the door, leaving me behind. 98. A little, but given the moment I was having, I wasn't too upset. I'd rather see her alive and as far away from the monster than dead. 99. It scratched my arm, but it didn't have animal paws. It had human hands with really long nails. It tried to tear out my throat, but I lifted the pillow and shoved deep into its mouth. I learned that's what you do when a dog tries to bite you. You shove your whole hand into its mouth, hurting it in the process. I obviously couldn't use my bare fist since the creature's open mouth was as big as my head, so it got a mouthful of pillow. 100. I ran out the door and didn't look back. When I reached camp, Ms. Ramage called to me from one of the buses they used for field trips. There were 2 of them and filled with the campers and counselors accounted for. The rest of the place was dark and kind of scary. 101. Her hair was all wild and frizzy. When she yelled at me to enter the bus, her voice was deeper, almost manly, and she had a shotgun in her hand. She was pretty epic, if you think about it. 102. Yep, it was like she knew what she was doing. Holding up the gun just right, aiming directly at the charging monster and firing. 103. Yeah, it was right on my heels. I could hear it running after me. I panicked because my lungs are always the first things to give out when running long distances at such high speeds. I think my mom calls it exercise-induced asthma, but let's be honest. I'm a gamer, not a marathon runner. 104. I could see the bus a few yards away and could barely catch my breath. 105. The first shot struck the beast, knocking it off its feet, and the second shot killed it. 106. That's what the kids were saying. They saw it fall to the ground and didn't get up. 107. As I got inside, Ms. Ramage slammed the door shut and started the bus. She didn't even wait until I took my place beside Ruth before shifting into gear and flooring the accelerator. Poor Bentley was still throwing up in a bowl, and some of it splashed onto the floor when the bus went over a speed bump. 108. I only had a second to glance back at the camp and couldn't find the creature anywhere. 109. Around 1 a.m. 110. Sheriff Rhodes wasn't happy being woken up in the middle of the night. We bunked at the recreation center while our parents were contacted and told about the incident. 111. I'm certain it wasn't a bear. The forest rangers kept saying it was most likely a diseased bear since they don't attack without provocation or in defense of their young. Ms. Ramage was in so much shock she couldn't recall exactly what she saw. But it was strange how as soon as a bear was mentioned, it's as if everyone's brain recalled seeing a bear. But I knew it wasn't that. 112. Nope. 113. Ruth agrees that we saw something we'd only recognized in movies. 114. A werewolf. 115. It's okay if you don't believe me. My parents figured I was in shock, and I've been seeing a therapist about it. I told the rangers and the local police everything I knew. They tried not to laugh when I described the monster. I don't expect people to believe me, but I hope this helps with your investigation on the string of murders that ripped through Cold Springs this past summer. 116. Ruth headed home. She was an out-of-towner who came to Camp Tree Trail because her cousin used to live in Cold Springs and had invited her 1 year to attend. She loved it and had been attending for a couple years now, though I'm not sure she'll ever come back after what happened. 117. Through email. Before she left, she kissed my cheek and apologized for abandoning me in the cabin to die. I forgave her, though. You can't stay mad at those beautiful green eyes. 118. They still haven't caught who's responsible. I doubt they ever will. Can't really broadcast on the news for people to keep an eye out for a werewolf. 119. Peter Adams believed he saw a werewolf when he was attacked back in May. It's sad that his girlfriend didn't make it. Susie babysat me whenever my brother couldn't. 120. I'm not sure where he is. After a couple teens were attacked recently, Peter disappeared. I remember my friend Parker Haslam said he had gone into the woods to kill the werewolf and most likely got eaten. I don't think that's true because they haven't found his body yet. 121. Grover's Pike Campgrounds. 122. Matthew Larson and his friends were out past curfew, and the werewolf attacked them. Only he and Jason Fink survived, but they haven't mentioned a werewolf attacking their friends. They've instead said what everyone else had been saying. It's a bear that's terrorizing Cold Springs. 123. Everything's closed until further notice. Camp Tree Trail especially. 124. Everyone keeps saying it's a bear, but you already know what I think. 125. You're welcome. I'm glad I could help. Now, who did you say you worked for again? End of recording. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation of The Investigation of Camp Tree Trail by M.E. Hansen. Performed for you by Kirby Heyborne. Copyright 2023 by M.E. Hansen. Production copyright 2025 by M.E. Hansen. All rights reserved. For information on books by M.E. Hansen, please visit the website authormehansen.com. This has been a production of K&M Publishing.